Yanni?
One final question. In terms of the recommendations that are going forward, there's nothing here that kind of talks about EQC.
I've added one in that I was going to tell you about when we got to it.
Right. So
we're going to go through the individual recommendations. So I've got requests that the Mayor, the Chair of the Environmental Committee and the Acting Chief Executive meet with EQC and the Insurance Council to understand the progress they're making on land and repair strategies and their potential contribution to resolving these issues, because the contribution is not crystal clear, it's not clear cut. EQC is entirely governed by legislation, and there's obviously some issues around their categorisation of land as increased vulnerability to flood risk, and there are so many issues in there that it's probably better that we just meet with them, get an update, and feed that into the whole process.
So what I'm concerned about is the people that are in flood risk zones at the moment, increased flood management areas. We've got a proposed district plan, and we've also got EQC repairs happening that don't need consents. And so in Woolston, houses are actually being lowered into an area of elevated risk.
Yeah.
So in the consenting part of the technical report, that's not really picked up.
No.
But it does seem to me there's an urgent meeting required with EQC and
Yeah,
NB,
there is.
and with probably our building consents people to talk through consent requirements or expectations in these areas with what we know. We can't have people's houses, in my view, being lowered into an area that's got an increased risk of flooding.
Well, I think I've also made the point on more than one occasion that it's just wrong to require somebody to fix their house in an area that continues to expose them to an under the 50 year, which is the Building Act level, and there are areas in the city that are in that category.
If staff have any comment on what we may be able to do in a very immediate situation, these people are getting repairs done at the moment as we speak, so we do quite need I think an urgent response to this issue.
I can't actually comment on that because it's part of that regulatory consenting side of the business that in the task force I wasn't asked to go and look at it, but I do acknowledge that there is that issue that has been happening.
Yeah, and Building Control were engaged in the task force to look at some of those Building Act compliance requirements as part of it. And of course, if it's just a minor repair that doesn't trigger a building consent, there's an issue. But there was one conversation I had with a registered surveyor who's done a lot of work on measuring floor levels within this area. But not only have we experienced the settlement of land of up to ½ metre, the floor levels of the houses due to the seismic shaking have also sunk as well. So you've got the combination of the land sinking and the house sinking, and there's a belief that that's, in some terms, to reinstate that to its previous level, you'd have to put it back to the vertical height it was before, which means virtually a house raise or a rebuild. So these are the sorts of conversations that need to happen.
But it's really time critical because people are incredibly stressed out that it seems to be that they don't need consents. So I would have thought one of the options should be, and the sooner that we can do it the better, is that anyone that's getting work to their foundations in a flood risk zone, flood management area, needs to have a building consent. At the moment, my understanding is there's just guidelines and it's really discretionary as to whether the builder chooses to go with it or not based on their assessment.
Yeah, you can't change a regulatory framework just by passing a resolution. So, but I think that by putting down this requirement that we meet with the Insurance Council and with the EQC, I'm happy to add the words as a matter of urgency. I'm well over, well not well over, but I'm well aware of the importance of the issue, and I know that John Mackey has been meeting with an individual who's been communicating with a number of us, and the concerns that are raised are serious and they require a serious response, but they also require us to do it within the legal framework. So, and it is when we get into legal regulatory matters that we have to be ultra cautious and get it right. So, but I agree that it is urgent. Glenn?
Thank you. Just in relation, Mike, to some of the joined-up approach across the council, we've already been doing a bit of work on the possibility of relocating houses. So, do you imagine that you could consider using that work? We've got an RFP out at the moment to look at is a possible option?
I wouldn't be able to answer that because I'm not aware of the work that's been done on that affordable housing or that
through the housing committee.
Housing committee work.
A trial run of relocating 10 houses.
But it would make sense to see if there's opportunities and line them up.
That'd be great.
Ali?
I just wanted to reiterate too the points that Yanni made and just say so that people don't think that we're ignoring it. This is a major issue in Flockton as well. And not only is it people who are getting repairs done presently, these are people who have had repairs completed. Yep.
There's no question about that. All right, well, let's go through the individual recommendations. We'll just go through them one by one. Because staff didn't have a lot of input into them, perhaps if you've got any issues that you'd like to sort of stop off on it. I don't know. Have you got an update on the 600,000? There's a large number in there about funding the task force work to date. So I just asked the acting chief executive to explain the 600,000.
Thank you.
And I asked Michael Day, who's the finance manager, to bring along the information and talk to it.
Oh.
Is Michael ready to do
Michael.
Yep. So those costs are mainly made up of consultants being involved. You've heard earlier about there's been quite a number of consultants involved in both the investigation, walkthroughs, consultation, etc. That makes up probably about 80% of those costs. There are a few staff costs involved in that. They are the costs directly of right across council associated to this project. Some of those will already be funded within existing budgets,
Right.
but we need to have clarity across where the costs are spent. So that's the predominant makeup of that. There's other incidentals like flights, etc., but that's not of significant nature. The costs of any temporary work that's been done to date has actually gone through our operational budgets or through the earthquake side.
Right. So largely it's the consultancy work to bring on within a relatively short time frame, and so we're being asked to retrospectively approve that being brought forward and to seek the support of the two clients in the horizontal infrastructure rebuild to agree to that. Noting that the the technical report for temporary flood defence measures was completed only on Friday, needs to be reviewed by senior council engineers, policy and legal staff prior to being finalised. We've agreed to the release of the draft technical report. I think everyone has to agree to that because we've already released it. And with financial and commercially sensitive information being removed, there is some parts of the report that have been removed, and all of the appendices aren't there at the moment. But again, delegate to the Mayor, the Chair of the Environmental Committee and the Acting Chief Executive to approve the release of the final report. We're going to work very hard to get that done as quickly as possible. It's got a lot of rich information for individual areas about the extent of the different approaches that can be adopted, particularly around maintenance, and I found that incredibly helpful. There's 325 pages when you take the whole lot into account. I read it yesterday. It really is incredibly important document, and I think it's going to help inform what we do next extremely well. Note the time constraints on the task force and commend all of those involved for producing such a comprehensive analysis on the specific causes of flooding in each of the priority areas, noting the commitment to find solutions for vulnerable property owners. So we really do appreciate that, and it's certainly heartfelt from all of us. Requesting the Acting Chief Executive to establish a second phase task force, one, to get that confirmation of the level 1 properties, to provide a recommended program of actions and costs to implement urgent solutions in each catchment, and that should include a temporary pumping solution in Flockton. I think that's something that a lot of advanced work has been done on that, and that could be got up and running very quickly. The repair of flat gates in the Avon and Heathcote rivers, the dredging of the Heathcote River, the removal of debris and improved maintenance regime. If that means renegotiating some of the contracts and just getting that work on a constant improvement basis, I think that it really will give people a lot of reassurance. Then delegating again to the same three the authority to agree the program and implementation timeframe, noting that some of this work may be authorised to commence immediately. Ensure that the skirt work program is fully aligned with the land drainage recovery program. I think that came up in a number of comments that we had back, not only from staff but from people out in the community and from councillors, obviously. Meet with the SARA, well, the CCC SARA flood steering group to ensure that all of the work streams are aligned. I think that's pretty critical. They're doing some good work. I think they've been set up about 8 weeks ago, and to really align and make sure that there aren't any gaps and no double up happening, that would be great. Identify any other areas that have been impacted by flooding on the proposed levels 1 to 3 vulnerability and report on those. And that picks up Yanni's point, you know, parts of the central city. I think there might be parts of South Brighton close to the estuary that could possibly be in that category as well. There might be the odd area close to streams in the Fendleton area, I'm not sure. I urgently review criteria for assessing flood risk and land movement in Littleton to improve the analysis. As I said before, assess upstream developments for their contribution to flooding and whether mitigation requirements are being fully implemented. So a lot of upstream developments were subject to them putting in place mitigation. Has that been done effectively? Is that operational? Is there more that we could be doing in that area? And also talk to the Ministry of Education regarding a comprehensive response to flooding affecting schools. Request that staff produce a program of community information meetings and other priority areas by the 16th of May. So that's by the end of the week we'll know when we'll be out in all of those communities again. Reinforce our view that the use of the residential red zone is a major component of long-term flood management and land drainage solutions for the city, and request that the Chief Planning Officer, as a matter of urgency, prepare a master plan which identifies the parts of the residential red zone that are required for this purpose. I took great comfort from the Prime Minister's speech a couple of weeks ago, where he made it clear that this needed to be resolved before we could get out and consult with the public about the future use of the residential red zone, and I know that that will be an enormous relief to the city as a whole. It's a major asset in terms of resolving some of these long-term issues in our city. Request the Chief Planning Officer to ensure the alignment, as I've said, with the NERP. Note that Section 16.3 of the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Act enables us to request the Minister to direct us to develop a recovery plan. It seems to me that this is a time where we should have a conversation with the Minister about whether the land drainage recovery plan program should become a statutory plan under the Act, and that I'm not necessarily persuaded that that should be the case, but I think we should open up that conversation now, because the advantage of including it under the legislation is that it could give us access to the statutory powers that could be incredibly effective in making sure that those long-term solutions are able to be implemented in a shorter time frame as is possible. Request that the Mayor, well, the three of us meet with the EQC, we've already discussed that, and request that a progress report comes to the Earthquake Recovery Committee of the Whole on the 5th of June, which has delegated the power to act on any recommendations. And the reason I've chosen that date is because that is the date that the Flockton report will come back to the Earthquake Recovery Committee of the Whole, and I intend to have that with power to act as well. So that will enable us to wrap things up into a neat package of work, and I think that it's that really puts us on a good pathway. So those are the recommendations. So I'll now open it up to debate. Yanni?
Just wanted to signal, with the permission of yourself, just some suggested amendments. One is in the 11.9, just to include MB, because I think Ministry for Building, Innovation and Employment, or Economic Development, I think they actually have a role around things like guidance notes, around consenting, around repair strategies. So I just think they're an important player in that conversation.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, and I think we need to include Sarah on that basis as well.
Yeah.
So meet with Sarah, comma, MB, we'll just call them MB, comma, that's right.
And I think you should probably include our own building. I don't know who from part.
We will,
We'll do that.
we will.
Okay,
I mean, the
great.
acting chief executive includes the organisation.
Okay, great.
Yep.
And the second point was just in regards to the skirt alignment.
Yep.
And I'm just trying to find it on the sheet that we were given. Oh,
11.
ensure that the skirt work program is fully aligned with the land drainage recovery program.
Yep.
Whether that's where the natural environmental recovery program should be put in as well, because it seems to me it's not just the land, it's actually aligning skirt to both of those programs. That's critical. I know we've already asked for a report on how we can actually get that done. I did also wonder whether we need to be communicating to our client governance group our concerns over the skirt, so that we're actually talking to someone about that being done rather than just passing the note here.
I've got that in the task force to get the skirt work program in there, but I wanted the chief planning officer to do the alignment work around the land drainage recovery program in the NERP.
The concern is that the natural environment recovery program talks a lot about stormwater, talks a lot about flooding and land drainage.
Yeah.
And
But
it's not currently aligned to the skirt work.
no,
So
I know.
It seems like you should
But
really
I wouldn't
try.
get the flooding task force to do that. That's the point. So it needs to go somewhere else. I've got the skirt work program fully aligned with the land drainage recovery program because it makes sense for the task force to be working with skirt to get that alignment. But what you're talking about is a bigger question. Well, why don't we get the same group of three to go and meet with skirt, or with the horizontal infrastructure governance group, or to ensure alignment between these things?
4.3, is it?
Yeah, no, it's, well, yeah, I can understand the councillor's concern. So it's a separate issue. So underneath, request that the chief planning officer to ensure the alignment.
I mean, I
It isn't-
support ensuring that it's aligned. I'm just not quite sure the mechanism we've got to do that.
but they're two separate issues. I know what you're talking about, but they're two separate issues. So it's a separate piece of work. Well, no, because it's basically it's a separate issue, but
I've already got a request for a report to come back on how that can happen, so we'll just follow it up through that process.
a request.
For how skirt parameters can be changed to take into account the natural environmental recovery program. But the thing is, if you're going to go talk to the minister about having a statutory land drainage recovery plan, actually you might want to think about some of the stuff that's in the natural environmental recovery program.
Yes, I
also
know.
being included in that.
I agree, which was actually at the back of my mind with that conversation too. Yeah. It's not to do with that. It's separate. Is it necessary for this resolution? No, it's not. Yeah. I know exactly what you want to do, and I agree with it, and we'll find a way of doing it. I don't think we need a resolution on that. Is that so? Should we debate the? Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy just very briefly to say again, just commend staff for the work that they've done on this. There are a number of issues we need to work through. I think it's really good that the task force will continue to its second phase, and I think there's still a lot of community engagement that needs to happen, but this is a fantastic start, and I think that the holistic approach that we're now taking to the flooding issues in our city is post-earthquake is incredibly important, and we need to continue down this path.
Phil,
Look, I think this has been a great piece of work too. I think the interdisciplinary way of working both internally and externally has worked fantastically. And all of these recommendations really add to, in my view, sort of like adding to key parts of the engine to drive, flood protection and prevention in our city. So I think they all add up, and already we've achieved a lot of progress, and there's a lot more to do.